There are some folks who are so situated that they have lots of fresh artichokes, especially in the spring and summertime, so I thought this might be a good time to show everybody how to actually clean an artichoke. If you want, you can use canned artichokes, which are absolutely fine. Just get the ones that are packed in water. Don't get the ones that are packed in oil. They tend to be seasoned and flavored, and then you have a big oily, gloppy mess in your dip, and you don't want that. So the order that these go into the bowl really doesn't matter. I've got my fresh jumbo lump crab meat. I've got my mayonnaise. Put that in there. I've got Madeira. I'm using 2 tablespoons. This supplies a nutty, herbal, oaky, vanilla tinge background to the dish that's really, really, really crucial. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of salt. Not too much because the crab has a beautiful salinity to it. I've got my paprika, just a few pinches, maybe a half a teaspoon. Some cayenne, 1 big pinch, just to give it a little punchy kick. Ground white pepper. Garlic. Beautiful cloves of red Russian garlic here. And depending on the size of it, I'm not a big fan of too much garlic in something. We're not making garlic dip, we're making a crab and artichoke dip, but the flavor of the garlic in there is so wonderful, especially as it cooks. And now what I'm doing is I'm just going to slice this up a little bit and then rock my knife back and forth. I do want small pieces of garlic in here. I don't want it necessarily to disappear as I would in a salad dressing, so that's why I'm not using a microplane. I'm actually doing it the old-fashioned way. And every time you pass your knife back and forth over this, it's gonna get smaller and smaller and smaller. But about a tablespoon of the fresh garlic. Parsley. Now when you have parsley that's this beautiful, I use the stems because the stems of parsley are not bitter. They're actually quite tasty. Don't use big woody stems that are down at the end, but the ones near the top are gorgeous, and you don't need to take the leaves off those top stems. Now whenever I'm cutting parsley, I'll cut, a third of a cup, quarter cup, and then I'll wrap whatever I don't use in a wet paper towel and put it in a Ziploc bag in my refrigerator, because then I have parsley the next morning for an omelet, for a smoothie, whatever it is that you might like. Do not chop your parsley to death. Gently chopped, fresh, washed, and dried parsley will chop cleanly. If it's too wet, you're gonna get that gross sort of shiny look. And I actually want people to bite down on pieces of parsley in here. So I haven't turned this into cat food. I left it in nice big pieces, even though I would consider that finely chopped. And this tablespoon or 2 is perfect for an omelet. So I'm just gonna reserve that to my refrigerator. I wanna put my cheese in there, and yes, seafood and cheese do go together. I'm looking for about a cup. The Parmesan cheese here gives this a very nutty, salty, soury, cultured tone. Marries up beautifully with the crab and artichoke. So don't use Pecorino Romano, it's too salty. Don't use blue cheese. A good classic Italian Reggiano, real Parmesan cheese is what you want. Let's assume you are starting with real artichokes. I break off this outer layer of leaves. Now I will save these for artichoke soup or some other purposing. For this dish, I'm looking to get down to the tender inner leaves at the core surrounding the heart. So those get reserved. Slice the top off. You're gonna end up with the nice barrel-shaped heart. And then you're able to take a real good visual, and you wanna clean this down so that the dark green goes away and the pale yellow is still there. Now, a lot of people will tell you to take a lemon and rub it all over there so it doesn't turn color. I'm baking this in a gratin, so all I want to do is be able to store my artichokes and prevent the iron in them from oxidizing by putting it into heavily acidulated water. So that means for every quart and a half like that, you want about 1.5 lemons. And I drop all of the lemon in there because the oil that's in the skin, let's put a little lemon juice in there, why not? Not in the recipe, but why waste a lemon? All of the oils that are in the skin of the lemon that you use for zest are going to be releasing their antioxidant properties. We then have the stem to deal with. Cut the end off. I want to use the nice little green end there, but I want to get this tough fibrous stuff away. And so just choking up on your paring knife, you can just take this stuff away. Again, we're not making a salad or a crab stuffed artichoke, so it doesn't have to be perfect. We're making a gratin, so don't get into analysis paralysis about this if you have a tiny little bit of green on there, but it's going to be cooked up beautiful and tender, so you want to sort of preserve that. Then I will take one more cut till I reveal the choke. This piece of artichoke is delicious and tender. And when I'm using fresh artichokes, I will take this pale, pale, pale yellow part. This is the part that you scrape off with your teeth when eating the artichoke when it's hot. Make sure to have no purple. And I'll add that in there because on a canned artichoke, which are machine cut, that's what these little leaves are, right? Matches up from there. It's what sits on top of the heart. Working with a small paring knife at an angle, rotate this in your hand, going at about 35, 40 degree angle, and you start to reveal the choke underneath there, all of those hairs. And once you make your first cut, you then have a better idea of how deep they go. So then you can cut them all out. And as you can see, I'm not going too deep. I would rather make a second pass than lose that beautiful tender artichoke heart that's inside there. Once I get to that part, if you've been doing this for a while, you can scrape with your knife. If you haven't been doing this for a while and you're a little afraid of doing that, or you're just beginning to cook in the kitchen, by all means use a spoon. But now you have a beautiful, cleaned artichoke heart. Now, I'm going to steam or cook these for 10, 15 minutes before I put them into my gratin, my hot dip. So I'm just going to slice them into pieces that will cook a little quicker, right? When you slice them, you may find on the edge, as I just did here, that you have a little bit of that choke to cut out. Just take a look at your food. Every artichoke is different. They're found in nature, right? Acidulated water, they won't turn color on you. Steam these, boil them for 10, 15 minutes, let them cool, and they'll be delicious and tender. And you can use those for salads or whatever you want. Once you get into this technique and you're more comfortable with an artichoke, the easier this is going to be. Most people don't have regular access to fresh artichokes, and so I like to show them how to do it with the canned or jarred variety. So, cutting at an angle so that I have pieces of leaf and pieces of heart in as much of the artichoke as I can. I think it's much more attractive and it's easier to dip into. Make sure these are well drained. I put them in the bowl, I tilted away the liquid, I gave them a gentle squeeze. I'm giving them another gentle squeeze as it comes out of that small bowl. And by the way, the recipe designates a proper amount of artichoke in there. If you only have one can and you want to throw some zucchini in it, go for it. That combination of crab and artichoke flavor will be there even if you just have one can. It's a great place to get rid of some extra veg that's in your fridge. And at this point, we're ready to stir and combine. And I just make sure that I smear that mayonnaise around, because you want to make sure that the mayonnaise and the cheese is evenly incorporated throughout this dish. That's the key. I mean, you don't want to bite into a lump of paprika or cayenne. Those tend to assimilate really easily. You want this well combined. And if you notice, I'm spoon tossing, going down to the bottom and folding up to the top. And what that is doing is it's mixing my ingredients without breaking up the crab. Don't be going up and down like that and destroying the lumps of lumped crab meat. That's why you paid the extra money to have those beautiful lumps in there. And that looks really nicely incorporated to me into our pan. Nice gratin dish here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the rest of my paprika, and from about a foot overhead, I'm just going to gently sprinkle so that the top of this has that beautiful mosaic. Maybe a little bit more of that parsley, a little bit more of that salt, and then, just a little more parm, because that's going to develop a kind of a crustiness on the top there. It'll melt through the herbs and paprika, and it'll really give this a pretty look. All right, so 375 to 425 really doesn't matter as long as you're north of 375. I've preheated this oven to 525 degrees, and I'm putting it in the upper reaches of the oven before I change the temperature. The reason that I preheat it to 525 before turning it down to 400 is very simple. When you open an oven, 1/3 of the heat escapes. 1/3. I can't tell you how many people cook their food like a 20-pound turkey that's ice cold because they haven't let it come to room temperature, and they preheat to 325, and they open the door, and then they walk and get their turkey, and they come back and they slide it in. Essentially, it's a cold oven again, and then they shut it. Your turkey will take an extra half hour to 45 minutes to cook, and then they pull it out according to the time in the recipe, and they have raw turkey. Beautiful Pullman loaf. I'm just going to show you how to make some fun little crispities here. Use a very sharp serrated knife. Hold your wrist. It's going to be slightly awkward at first, but you don't want to tilt your knife. Gentle sawing motion back and forth, and you want to go straight through the loaf. Next up, let's butter these. This is a very buttery bread. I just want to gently do that. I'm not making cinnamon sugar bread for my kid. I just want to glaze these so we have a nice buttery finish. But I like soft butter in case I have ears of corn or toast that needs slathering. Now, once it's at this point, we are now going to trim it. Take those crusts away. Don't worry about misshapen elements. We're going to trim these down once more. No two slices of bread are alike. You don't need to end up with perfect rectangles, because when we cut them in half, you'll see that the fact that they're uneven actually makes them look a little more natural and nifty. And at this point, all I want to do is start the back end of the knife and draw through once. Back end of the knife, draw through, cut once. That way you're not going to break pieces of your buttered bread. And then I put this into a 400-degree oven until it's nice and brown. And I slide this into the upper third of a 400-degree oven and let that toast up nice and pretty. After about 10 minutes, the toasts are ready. And you remember what I told you before about not getting into analysis paralysis about these? Now you know why. If you wait for the whole thing to get totally browned, you're going to annihilate your artichokes and crab. So you want it to look kind of like what I'm about to pull out of the oven. I always keep one of these in the baking dish in the freezer, so I can just pop it in and let it cook for an hour, hour and 10 minutes. But once you know it's cooled off and it's not going to remove your complete upper palate of your mouth, then you can sit there very nonchalantly, set your glass down, and take a bite.